I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you've had the good fortune to tune into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your family's health, your happiness. And we like to cover a lot of ground because ecology covers a lot of ground. Literally, ecology blankets the planet, and it's the only science that ties all the other sciences together, physics and chemistry and meteorology. And so, you know, I have a master's in education, and they have different levels of learning. And one level is taking things apart, being able to look at all the different pieces of stuff. But a higher level is being able to put all those pieces back together again and understand how the whole thing works. And that's what the science of ecology is all about. And we're going to put together a really good show for you today. Once again, broadcasting from my living room, and you know, this may be the last week broadcasting from the living room. I might be back in the studio next week. We're just going to see. Fingers are crossed. You know, right now I don't have the usual studio advantages because of COVID. You know, I think the thing I miss most is the stylists. You know, you can go in there and get your hair cut and get your eyebrows done. You know, I've reached that certain age where the eyebrows on guys kind of get out of control, and without grooming, it can actually be a danger to your friends and family. If you like go to kiss somebody and you've got those eyebrows sticking out, it can actually, let's just say I really miss the being able to have the stylist there in the studio. But I am in my suit. I've dressed up in my suit, and I'm wearing my nice solar tie that was given to me by a listener. Thanks again to that listener who sent that to me. And we have a great show coming up for you. I have secured an interview with the deputy ambassador from Germany to the United States. It took a couple months of emails back and forth, but he's going to be on at about 8:15. We're going to be talking about Germany's energy policy. It's called Energiewende, and I'll just let you tell him. I'll let him tell you all about it. It's really inspiring. Another thing that's inspiring that I wanted to mention today is that we have been doing very well on the show in terms of growing listeners, growing audience, and in fact, our podcast service, after we do the show live, it's rebroadcast as a podcast and a YouTube video, and we use Podomatic as our podcast provider, and we have climbed to number 46 this past week on Podomatic. That's out of thousands of podcasts that people are doing. That's number 46 in the news category. So it's a subcategory. But, thank you to especially thank you to those of you listening on Podomatic or Spotify or any of those podcast services, you've bumped us up. Appreciate it. Another thing that's coming, besides this wonderful show where we're going to have our interview with Ricklef, and then we'll hear from our advertisers. Then we have, of course, our Eco News and Views. Rebecca Wood will be joining us again this week, luckily, and she's working on a story about a local Toledo artist, an environmental artist. That should be interesting. Letter from the Future is in the hopper, all ready to go. And so, another good show coming up. But another thing coming up is fall. I was out walking with my wife out there on the Slippery Elm Trail, and some leaves are turning yellow and starting to fall already. This morning, as I was getting ready to do the show, pre-dawn actually, I could hear Canada geese flying overhead. They're starting to practice to get ready for their migration, although they don't need to migrate near as much as they used to, because as we know from last year, right now instead of the regular 4 seasons, we've got the spring, summer, fall, and then we've got the season that I call gray, which is the in between all the leaves being gone and before the first snowfall. So we got winter, spring, summer, fall, gray, and then a little bit of winter, short winter, and then back to spring again. So, but it's coming. Fall is coming, and things will change. I mean, that's one thing that we're guaranteed of. This is a call-in show, 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065 anytime in the next hour, although you won't be able to call in during Ricklef's interview because that is actually a pre-recorded interview. He won't be live. But after that, you can call in about any environmental topic, not just what we're discussing on the show. And in fact, we had a caller last week, Carl, called in and was asking about rock dust, because there's a plan or a suggestion of a plan that some scientists are making that you can take basalt, which is a volcanic rock, and grind it up and spread it on farm fields and use this to help combat global warming. So I did some research on it, and the actual term, it's called enhanced rock weathering, because rocks in their course of weathering do actually take carbon out of the air. That's part of the whole carbon cycle, because rain is slightly acidic naturally because it picks up carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and creates carbonic acid, and then that falls on the rocks, and then that combines with chemicals in the rocks to make carbonate. And so that is a natural way that nature takes things out. And one thing I wanted to stress in today's show is that nature can correct itself. Nature has all these mechanisms for fixing itself, like taking acid and taking carbon out of the air through rainfall and rock erosion. And all we have to do is to stop throwing it out of balance, stop doing the polluting, stop creating the problems. And once we stop creating them and making them worse, nature can fix them. Have some faith in the planet, because there's some people that are like doomsayers right now. They're saying it's too late. We can't do anything. So why do I try anything? Just fire up your 8-mile-per-gallon car and go joyriding or whatever. It's that kind of attitude, that can't do attitude, that does guarantee failure. If we do not attempt to fix what the problems we're causing, then we will fail. We know that from history, from looking at other societies. But if we do try to stop putting carbon in the air and stop creating nuclear waste and stop doing all these terrible things we're doing, if we make an effort, if we do that, nature will help us. Nature will fix itself, and that's one of the ways it does it, through if once we've stopped putting carbon in the air, this natural rock weathering would eventually help bring the carbon down. I've seen estimates that it'd take about 200 years for nature to take out all the excess carbon we've put in, but we'd start seeing benefits immediately, just like somebody who stops smoking immediately finds they can walk a little farther and food tastes better and all that stuff. So, but But back to rock dust, the whole idea of grinding up basalt and spreading it on farm fields. I don't think we should do it right now for a couple reasons. One, they're very iffy on the calculations in terms of how much carbon it would take out versus how much carbon it would cost to do it. This is a very preliminary study, back of the envelope kind of things. And I think in practice we would find it would take almost as much carbon to do this terrible thing as it would as you'd gain in carbon loss. But the main reason I think we shouldn't do it right now is that it's kind of like someone who's an alcoholic who wakes up every morning with a hangover, and so they're looking for hangover cures. They're looking for Gatorade and tomato juice, and the main thing they need to do is to stop waking up with a hangover every morning. The main thing they need to do is cut down on their drinking. And so I'm afraid if we pursue these geoengineering things, we're going to use that as an excuse to not drop carbon, to continue to use oil and coal and other carbon, and that is guaranteed disaster. I mean, literally, that is guaranteed disaster. So the rock dust, maybe long term, maybe after we've stopped having a carbon economy, we can look at that, but I don't think we need to pursue that right now. All right. Well, so I think we've reached the point in the show where we can actually go to this interview. I'm very happy to have gotten it. And just a little bit of introduction. Germany is getting off carbon. Germany has made the commitment. They're going to go carbon free, and they're going to close all their coal plants, and they're going to close all their nuclear plants. They had already made the commitment to shut down all their nuclear plants. They actually made that commitment almost 20 years ago with this program that they called Energiewende. And don't worry, one of the things is in the interview that'll be translated into English. But they were thinking about going off the nuclear part of it, but then Fukushima happened, and Germany just recommitted and said, okay, all the nukes are shut down. And they're well on their way. They have a very carefully laid out plan on how to do this, and they've been following that plan, and it's been working. And as you'll hear, as they follow the plan, all kinds of unexpected benefits have cropped up. And so I really wanted to get this interview. So Russell, are we set? Can we go to the interview now? Okay, so could you start by telling us your name and your position in the German government?
My name is Ricklef Beutin. I'm the Deputy Chief of Mission, so the Deputy Ambassador of Germany in Washington, D.C. And I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for having me on the program.
It's our pleasure. So Germany's official energy policy is it's called Energiewiende. Is that the correct pronunciation? Could you tell me the correct pronunciation and
of course,
and maybe translate that phrase into English?
Sure. So the pronunciation is Energiewende. So Energie in German, and Wende is the second part of the word. So what it means is Wende, so energy, of course, and Wende, what it means really is a turnaround. So energy turnaround, or as is mostly translated, energy transition. And what we mean by it is an adaptation and transition of basically of the whole economy to a system that's more environmental and more sustainable in terms of energy. And that includes the economic aspects and the social aspects of turning the economy towards a greener energy policy for the future.
That's great. Now, during public hearings here that we had here in Ohio last year for our state energy policy that was called House Bill 6 or HB 6, there were several critics that characterized Energiewende as a quote-unquote failure. Would you agree or disagree with that statement?
Well, I'm not privy to the details of this discussion and the remarks and whether the speakers were referring to individual aspects in the policy. But as for the whole policy, I would caution against the term failure. In fact, we consider it to be quite a big success, and I can tell you why if you want.
Yes, please.
As I said, this is about not just renewable energy. It's about that too, but not only. But it's really about a driver for greater energy efficiency for the whole economy, modernizing technology and innovation and digitization of the economy. I think what we've done over the years, and obviously it's a very challenging and long-term project, but what we've done so far, I think, is we've successfully laid the foundations to have this turnaround, have this transition, to be long-term more sustainable in energy usage, energy production, and at the same time have this at affordable cost and have it balanced in a social way, because obviously where you turn around industries and the whole economy, there will be job losses, but there's also job gains, and we can talk about that if you want to. And also, final point on what I think it's a success. If you look at the public support in Germany for it, actually more than 90% of the population support the energy transition.
That's amazing. That's great to hear. It doesn't come through very often, but actually most Americans also want to transition over to clean energy. It's just that our policies don't always agree with the public sentiment. So it's nice to hear that in Germany, at least, that is being expressed in actual policy. So what would you say are some of the most important successes in your policy, your energy transition policy?
Well, I would like to point you to maybe three issues here. So the first thing is the growth in renewable energy that we've seen over the years, over the decades, really. If you look at 1990, so 30 years ago, around 3.4% of the German energy consumption were covered by renewables. Today, 42% are covered of Germany's gross electric consumption by renewables. So this is a big rise in renewables. And at the same time, and I think that's important to mention, because that's usually a point of critique, the cost for energy generation from renewables has sharply declined. So in many instances, renewables have become competitive vis-a-vis other sources of energy, and they're becoming even more competitive. So that's point one. Secondly, we have a very secure energy supply in Germany. We've had that over the years and decades. Honestly, I can hardly remember any power outage ever in Germany. And if you look at the average number of power outage per inhabitant in Germany, it's a few minutes, about 15 minutes or something per year. So that's really low if you compare it to other industrialized nations. So what we're seeing is you can be very secure in your energy while transitioning to renewables. And of course, there's backup through other energy means and production methods that we still have. And the third thing I would like to mention is, and I've hinted at that before, the renewable energy sector is employing hundreds of thousands of people these days. So I have a number here that's a few years old, 2017, but still it may be impossible to illustrate it with that. So in 2017, 317,000 people, around that number, were employed in Germany in the renewables sector. Wow. And of course, as I said, as you turn around the economy and as you're decommissioning conventional power plants, of course, some jobs will be lost, and the same will be true with coal plants going from the grid in the next years and decades. But we think and we can, empirically see that the overall net employment effects are positive, actually.
All right, so more jobs, not fewer jobs, by making the transition.
Well, that has to be the aim, right? I mean, yeah. Of course, of course, there's an important part of the economy and job sector is in energy and is still in fossil fuels, and this is true in Germany and it's true in other countries in Europe. And if you make the policy change and you want to have coal plants, for example, go off the grid earlier, of course you have to deal with the social fallout, that's possible, and you have to do something for the regions and for the individual people. And that's what we're trying to do at the moment with this coal commission that we had that wanted to set the date for getting out of coal, but also find the measures that will accompany this transition.
Okay. So in addition to the making sure that employment, there isn't a big social upheaval because of people losing their jobs, what are some of the other challenges ahead for you with your energy policy?
Well, obviously, this is a very long-term project. This is not something that is done overnight or in 1 or 2 years, but it has already taken us a number of years before the decision to get out of nuclear, even then that decision, now having pinned down a time frame and a program to get out of coal. So this is a very long-term thing, and of course along the way you meet a lot of challenges. And of course one is cost. The criticism was for a long time, and it still is, and sometimes that it made renewables are not affordable enough or not competitive enough, and that the energy prices in Germany, electricity prices are pretty high compared to other industrialized nations. That is true, and of course, yes, there is subsidy that consumers have to pay for that. But as I said, it's a transition. The idea is to subsidize that in the beginning while it is becoming more competitive, and that's actually what's happening. So as we see more renewables going into the grid, for example, wind energy, the new tenders for these power plants of wind energy that are mostly offshore, they actually won't need subsidizing anymore. So what we're seeing is it's becoming cost effective, but it's still a challenge. And then, of course, if you have renewable energy, you need better storage methods, and there are lots of different aspects that you have to keep in mind while you try to do this. But really, as a bottom line, what we can say is the additional capacity that we're adding does not come at a premium price. So while new technology is needed, new investment are needed, and the money needs to be found, and the social cost needs to be mitigated, these are the challenges. I think in the long run it is paying out in terms of jobs, in terms of sustainability, and becoming more green and climate effective here.
Yeah, that's great. Now I've heard reports that Germany's gotten very sort of careful and ingenious with the way that you site things like wind turbines and solar panels. So you've been like installing a lot of energy capacity without dominating the landscape. And one example I've heard is that you actually use the medians in your highways for solar. Could you give me some more examples of like innovative siting and what kind of processes you use when you decide where to put turbines or solar fields?
Sure, of course. You have to remember that Germany is a pretty small country in terms of territory, right? And a very densely populated country at that. So we, just to illustrate, we're a country of the size of about half the state of Texas, a bit more, but it's not very big. And at the same time, we have about 80 million people of population compared to 330 million people in the United States. You can tell how densely populated Germany is. So what that means is you need to be very careful, and there will always be somebody living in the vicinity if you install new facilities. And you have to be careful with making that acceptable to people and, of course, technologically safe. So we have to be innovative. And things that we're finding are yes, people are not always happy with the plans, and then there are processes to mitigate that and to put in protests, and sometimes then the things aren't built as they were planned, and democratic processes going on. But what we're finding is three things maybe. Offshore wind is actually because people don't see it as much in front of their doors, is more acceptable and is actually working really well. So North Sea installations of wind energy are expanding. Then we have a lot of people actually installing solar panels on their roofs. And the way this works is that the people are incentivized to do that because they can then, if the energy they produce on their own house feed into the grid and use themselves, and if they have spare, it is fed into the energy grid. So people actually use their own property for solar energy a lot. And then what you mentioned, yes, along roads and along railroad tracks, there's possibilities as well, because they already kind of cut through the landscape. And you can actually, on both sides of the tracks or the road, use a certain margin for installations like that. That is a newer thing, but I think it may expand, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if people wanted more information about Energiewende, where would they go?
Well, there's a pretty good website that people could check out, and it's called energiewendeglobal.com. So if I can spell it for listeners, it's www.energiewende, one word, so that's ENERGIEWENDE, Energiewende, and then -global.com. I hope that was clear enough. I know it's a long German word, Germany famous for long words and composite words.
Yeah, and I'll have it up on the YouTube version. I'll have it spelled out for people too. So
okay,
yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that holds a lot of information on our policies there.
Right, and I've been on the site, and actually, that's how I got the information that some of what we were hearing in those public hearings was not accurate, and that's why I was so eager to have a representative of the German government come on and tell us a little bit about it directly. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like people to know about your program and that we haven't covered?
Really, every country and every region has to obviously decide on their own in a sovereign way how to mix your energy and what the production means are, because it so much depends on where you are geographically, and and there's obviously very different policies, and that is true in Europe as well, where European member states have very different backgrounds in energy production, but and yet we attempt to go together as the European Union to set our own climate policy goals, and set goals that every one of the member states can actually achieve, or some achieve them earlier and others later, and you provide for that. But people are willing to do that in the end, because we all realize that we're in the challenge of confronting climate change together, and that there's not one country that can do it alone. And what we're saying as Germany is, we probably can't be a blueprint with our system that's just taken 100% and will be right 100% for another country, but it is one way of successfully transitioning an economy over the long run, where people may be interested in seeing examples. And sure, there's elements that haven't worked from the beginning, and that people were right to criticize, but overall we think it's pretty successful, and we're happy about it.
All right. Well, we are very happy to have you on today, Mr. Beutin. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right. So, thank you very much for listening. And like I say, that interview took a while to set up, but I think it's really important that we hear that responding to climate change, responding to our environmental problems, it's not just theoretical. I mean, there are countries where it is being put into practice, and they're having great success, as you heard. And so this is not something that requires tons of sacrifice. This is something that will provide a lot of opportunity to Americans once we actually start doing it, once we actually change our policies, which hopefully will be happening very soon. One thing that we also can be happy about is our sponsors. For a Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging program, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There's several different ways you can reach them. One is simply pick up the phone and call 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897, and they'll be happy to talk to you about anything that they're doing or anything you could do in their parks. You can go to their website, which is wcparks.org, and they also have an app by that name, which is just go to the App Store and search for WC Parks, and there you can find updates on what they're doing and see some nice pictures people have taken in the parks of various things. And, of course, they have a Facebook page, and that is where they put a lot of their events. They put them up there on the Facebook page. Just search for Wood County Parks. So that's our sponsor, or that's our advertiser. And now we also have patrons. These are people who've gone to patreon.com, and they searched for a Green Future, and they saw our cool page there for potential patrons, and you just scroll down and you choose a level of membership. There's all sorts of different financial levels depending on your financial ability, but you just choose one of those, and every month, painlessly, a little bit of money will be taken out of your checking account and joyfully accepted by those of us here at For a Green Future. We couldn't be bringing you the show without our patrons, so we're very, very grateful to them. And that is at patreon.com for a Green Future. Okay, well, now it's time for some environmental stories. And Rebecca, I believe you are on the line with us.
I am, yes.
Yes, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah, last week.
Were you able to?
Sorry,
yes,
last week we had a crisis with the dog's health because he ate, you guessed it, a plastic bag, among other things. He ate everything. He ate a plastic bag with some hair and something edible in it, and you should have seen the amazing day-glow green fuzzy clump of horribleness that came out of it. It was so gross.
Well, I actually don't know if I should have seen that.
No,
think,
maybe not. You
think
and you really should not have smelled it.
Enough. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
well, he's feeling better now, though. Your Koga's feeling better.
He's on the mend. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's good. So,
yeah,
did you hear our interview with Ricklef?
Most of it, yeah. And my first thought is, oh my gosh, I have to tell my dad because, you know, my parents, my dad was stationed in the Army in Germany and in Karlsruhe. And Karlsruhe may have been where I was conceived on New Year's Eve of 1965. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to let him know that country is doing really well with the renewable energy. It sounds like, you know, if you just apply some common sense and listen to what the scientists are telling you, you do pretty well.
Yeah. I didn't want to actually say this during the interview, but Germany's kicking our butt.
Pretty much. They're kicking everybody's butt. They're great.
Yeah, they're just taking names and kicking butt, as they say. So, but speaking of, I actually was just trying to do a transition, and I have just collapsed completely because I can't really.
I was like, "Where's he going with this? This is not going to work."
Yeah, answer's nowhere.
Right.
So anyway, so I understand you've got a little story for us about a local environmental artist here in Toledo.
I do. Well, okay. This is a local artist of color who work has both environmental and social justice themes. Goes by the name of Grandma Gunmetal, aka Alana Stackard, and she does paintings, installations, object assemblages, and wearable art. And her work is consciously anti-consumerist in that it creates objects of beauty by upcycling everyday household objects, which really is like reminiscent of, you know, the way that poor and marginalized people have always done that, you know, and really just kind of, if you go back a little bit, everybody does this. Everybody's Depression era grandma was the sort of the OG recycler and liked to, wash off her tinfoil and reuse it in things. Or, my mother's a quilter, and I always thought it was really beautiful how, poor people, when you were just struggling to survive, would, create these beautiful objects, because they could have something really nice in their house, even though they could go out and buy something. And as with many of the environmentalists of color that we profiled on our Black History Month, there's also an element of survival involved in improving the material lives of the community while improving the physical environment, because she's currently raising money to pay some medical bills from the car accident that her son had. I think he was run over, actually. She has this one really great, I saw some of her stuff. Just look up Grandma Gunmetal on any social media. I really like her art. It's, colorful, it's quirky, it's a Becca kind of thing, and I think other people will like it too. She has this one really great piece that's a cage shoe in a cage that's called Crushing Capitalism. It's just really fun. And, paintings and some really beautiful little jackets and things, and, I wish I had some more money right now, but I can't because the dog in his stupid plastic bag.
Yes, well, you could blame the plastic industry for that one.
There you go. It's made me think a lot too. All this. Of course, we had to slap together a GoFundMe and get a line of credit and try to use the GoFundMe to pay it off. And, Alana's going through a similar thing in her family. And, you hear a lot in left-wing circles about how all these feel-good on the radio shows, the TV shows about how, features about how some kid has a lemonade stand to cure cancer and, the GoFundMe, it's horrible. People shouldn't have to have GoFundMes, and they shouldn't. They should not have to have GoFundMes to meet their basic needs. I agree. And sure, some of these feel-good stories on TV about some great thing that a little kid did, they're designed to anesthetize us, and take our minds away from the problems. But also, it reminds me of what my Unitarian uncle used to say, who had a strong humanist philosophy, that human being can be something we can all be proud of if we really try. And he used to say that, this kind of thing and a lot of other things we see in the world are evidence that human beings are basically good. In an individual level, we tend to be pretty compassionate and cooperative. That's a strong natural bent that we have, and we deserve better than the political systems, the environment we have, even some of the religious philosophies that we have. It's a problem in groups. We have trouble not getting the worst person to take over is all it is.
Well, so it sounds like you saw some of that reflected in this artwork there. It's Grandma Gunmetal, you say? Is the
Grandma Gunmetal? Yeah, and she
somebody
has
searched
smart.
For that on Facebook or
Facebook, all the Instagrams and the whatever you got out there. The social media I don't even know about because I'm old. But Alana's not a millennial either, but she has millennial kids. So, they have hooked her up. Whatever social media you got, she's on there.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks, Rebecca. All right. Now, on to more environmental news, environmental and ecological news. One, you remember this from all of last year, Rebecca? An HB6 update.
Okay. Oh boy, more HB6. Sinking feeling.
Right. So I have not had any luck directly contacting any legislators about this. Turns out they all went on break.
Of course they did.
Cynically saying in order to avoid dealing with House Bill 6 and to kind of like run away from it. But what has happened to the rumors are now that what is going to be proposed is a quote-unquote repeal, but a repeal that doesn't take effect until after the November elections. And
okay, why? Why not repeal it right the hell now?
Well,
it's bad. It had incredibly corrupt. Okay, never mind. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's
why
a good
anything,
question, Rebecca. And some are saying, since this is a rebroadcast on a nonprofit station, we can't just say this, but some are reporting, some are suggesting that this is a very cynical attempt to put off the actual repeal till after the election, because after the election, all those legislators are essentially untouchable for 2 years. So,
yeah, sounds about right. Sounds like something they do.
There's suggestions that what might be in the works is a delayed repeal, and that then itself is done away with after the election, because after an election
as
people
usual
can get angry, but they can't really do anything. So
when you're accused of corruption, or you're called on your corruption, the answer is sort of more corruption and dirty tricks, of course, because that's what you have in your toolbox.
Right. Now, none of this has been officially released yet. This is all rumors and leakage.
Right.
But, I've gotten it from a fairly reliable source. And so there is a big push right now to tell the legislature, the Ohio State Legislature, to get back into session and to repeal the thing before the fall election. And it would actually be to the advantage of most of the incumbents here, because there has been a survey released that says not only is something like 2/3 of Ohioans in favor of immediate repeal and complete repeal, not a repeal that lets First Energy or Energy Harbor or any other of these corrupt corporations keep the money, but people are also saying it's going to affect their vote in the fall on whether or not they vote for a legislator, an incumbent legislator, or not, if they voted for HB 6. So if they actually want to keep their jobs, they need to do a complete and immediate repeal, and that's what there's a huge coalition that's formed. It includes a lot of people that we've had on the show actually already, including Sierra Club and the Ohio Citizen Action, and they are pushing for an immediate repeal, telling the state legislator to get back and to not put off the repeal till after the election. There's a lot of hope. It may actually happen. So House Bill 6 repeal. This
is your big chance, Ohio legislator, do something right for a change.
Right. And so, if people want their legislators to act in the correct manner, then, this might be a good time for them, if they're so inclined, to actually contact a legislator, especially if someone who's never contacted a legislator before, because, legislators kind of are like, oh, yeah, same old people. But when new people start contacting them, that's especially right before an election like this one, that's when they actually react and take them into account.
Right.
Because their jobs, their nice cushy jobs are on the line. So we'll see what happens there.
And we're living in an era when normally apolitical people are suddenly getting interested in politics, because politics has gotten so outrageously nasty and dirty.
Right. Well, and it's coming to light. That is the one really good thing about this whole debacle, is that the crooked part, the corrupt shenanigans, didn't go unseen. That everybody suspected it at the time, and now we've actually seen it. It's come to light, and that is a beautiful thing when that happens in a democracy, and when people can react to that, and when changes happen because of that. That's the one wonderful thing about this whole process. So fingers are crossed again, and fingers and toes, crossing toes too.
Yeah, all the digits.
All right. Next environmental story. This one, it's you might think this is a little odd to report on, but if you recall, last year we had interviews with members of the Wet'suwet'en tribe up there in northern Canada. They're battling a pipeline, and they had occupied the pipeline route, and in fact their protest spread and literally paralyzed Canada, because people all over Canada blocked railroad lines and stopped trains and traffic. They blocked highways too, and in support of these people that are fighting this pipeline, the Wet'suwet'en tribe. And there was a report this past week that one of the chiefs there, his name is Chief Gizdewa, he had his cabin got burned down. It was arson. Somebody burned his cabin down there on the land, on the contested land in the unceded territories. On one hand, you might say, oh, just a simple case of arson, but no, this looks like it's part of a larger coordinated thing, because what happened 2 days before the cabin got burned down, a Houston paper, which is, of course, super pro fossil fuel industry, had sent a reporter up and took pictures of this cabin and said, look, there's nobody in there. They've abandoned the whole thing, which isn't true. It's just a cabin which was used seasonally and for religious purposes, so there wasn't continuous occupation. But 2 days, so they published this on the front page of a Houston paper, and 2 days later, that cabin got torched, got arsoned. And the RCMP is up there constantly patrolling that area ever since the protests. And so, if they're not there to prevent arson, you got to kind of wonder why they are there.
The police police have a history of not protecting some people and not protecting other people. Yeah,
and not protecting some property. And so this is
right.
And there was a little bit of questionable stuff. I think, for example, I used to support the oil industry, Joe, but now they've gotten violent and started burning property, so they're bad. There you go. All right. Yeah. So the oil industry has lost a supporter. All right. So
we just need to not have an oil industry anymore.
Right. Questions
somebody
about
did this.
The police involvement. They apparently they on one report they say that they were told at 9 a.m. by an anonymous phone call, which I don't think there are anonymous phone calls to the police anymore. If you call them, they know who called and they know what number it came from and so forth. But they said there was an anonymous call at 9 a.m. about the fire, except that in another of their reports they said they arrived at the scene at 8:15 a.m. So they
okay, and then they got the call at 9 a.m. Okay, great.
Yeah, something wasn't quite coordinated there, but this is an echo of what used to happen back in the 50s when Native Americans were just routinely people would go and burn their houses down and literally beat them up and just persecute them just because they were Native Americans. So let's hope that resolves itself in a more positive way than it would have back in the 1950s. Okay.
I take it that he and his family are okay?
Yes, yeah. No one was hurt in the fire.
There we go. Thank God.
All right, on to some more interesting news. 20 states have sued the Trump administration over their changes in NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and we've reported on those changes before. Basically, it would cut the public out of planning when they want to build big things near you. You would no longer have any root for comments or trying to influence the process at all, and also it would hamstring the whole process of NEPA because it would put strict deadlines on dealing with anything. So even if you found, there's an endangered species here, how can we mitigate what's going to happen to them if they build this bridge or this strip mine or whatever? Instead of dealing with that, the decision would have to be forced, and it would just be like, okay, get rid of the endangered species. So 20 states have joined in this lawsuit, including California. California is the lead state. And just a little note, this is the 100th lawsuit California has filed against Trump. Roughly half of them have been environmental and the other half have been social. So once again, Trump acting in a way contrary to the law that he is supposed to be enforcing. All right, number 4, plastics. Speaking of Koga, who went and ate what we call macroplastic, chunk of plastic, there's a new study out about the effects of the microplastics on us. And specifically, they went and did some autopsies on people who had volunteered their bodies to science after passing away, and they found microplastics in everybody, in every organ.
Wow.
They examined lungs, liver, spleen, and kidneys. Turns out we all eat about 5 grams of plastic a week. That's about the same amount as in a credit card. And there's really not enough information about what this plastic does to us when it gets into us, and it is in all of us. And there's a fear that what might be happening with this plastic is it could be acting as an irritant, as an inflammation, and chronic inflammation can cause cancer, but just by itself, even if chemically the plastic doesn't chemically change anything. If your body has a point of chronic inflammation, it's much more likely that that cancer will develop there than anywhere else in the body. So this could be really bad news, and we need to study it more. Microplastics are plastics for 5 millimeters, which is just barely visible, down to 1 micron, which is 1,000th of a millimeter. Nanoplastics are less than a micron. Human hair is about 50 microns. Now, I want to hark back to another thing I said earlier in the show about this, and that is that you hear a story like this one, and part of the reaction is to just say, we're all doomed. Okay, we're not doomed. Nature has a way of purifying itself, including getting rid of all these micro and nanoplastics. You might say, well, how could it do that? It does it through things like, for example, lightning strikes. Every time a bolt of lightning shoots through the air, it destroys literally tons of air pollution because it takes those complex molecules and zaps them all the way back to their basic, carbon and oxygen and whatever. It completely destroys the chemical compounds in the air. So nature, over time, and through things like forest fires, for example, so if you burn nano or microplastic, it will break down all the way back into carbon dioxide and water and other elements that make up the plastic. So if we stop putting it in, nature will eventually get rid of it. It'll fix it. And some of it actually is also going to settle down into like the bottoms of rivers and the bottom of the ocean and incorporate itself into sedimentary rock. So we're going to have, 20 million years from now, whatever kind of geologists there are, there's going to be this layer of plastic all over the earth that they can use to date when the continents shifted and stuff, because all these chemical compounds are going to be in there, but they'll be out of the biosphere. They won't keep circulating through our bodies, but we have to stop putting it in. So that's the hopeful part of that. And the other hopeful thing we're ready to go for is our letter from the future. All right. Yes, every week my granddaughter from the year great-great-granddaughter from the year 2300 sends me a letter, and she addressed it to Dear GGG, great-great-grandpa. It does feel good to be back to work again. I am amazed at how much pleasure I'm getting doing routine tasks. Taking samples from the borehole, culturing the bacteria, checking our procedures, inspecting the seals on the equipment that protects our cultures from contamination. As I'm doing all that routine stuff, I find myself grinning like some kind of idiot. Still, this is what I've trained for. Also, it takes full concentration to do a culture properly. No time to dwell on other problems or bad memories. Speaking of memories, remember Igor, the member of the Sami tribe who actually asked me to marry him? He is getting married after all. I'm happy for him. He was ready to get married, and now he's found someone. He's actually invited me to the wedding. I'm not sure if I'm going or not. I have to admit my feelings about it are a little mixed. Michael continues to improve slowly. The doctors aren't ready to say that he'll regain his full mental and physical abilities, but they aren't ruling it out either. Since the drilling has stopped, I've been busying myself with studying the orange substance in the rock I told you about last week. It's very strange. I've been working with the project chemist, And so far, we haven't been able to analyze it. It's very resistant to heat. The normal spectroscopy methods actually seem to cause it to change its chemical composition so that what you end up measuring is not what you started with. So far, she and I are stumped, but we're working on it. And what's life without a little mystery? Love you, GGG. Marie I. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So there we go. That's this week's letter from the future. What did you think, Rebecca?
That sounds very nice. What happened to I think I missed, probably missed the one where she finished the Super Elm Trail. Did you expand Super Elm Trail?
Oh, you didn't hear that? Yeah. Well, she made it all the way down to Cincinnati and actually camped down at the far end there for a day or two, and then went from there pretty much back to the Kola Peninsula, which is where she is based. So, yeah, one thing I just found out about the Kola Peninsula this last week that I did not know is that was the site of the largest man-made nuclear explosion in history, about 50 megatons.
Wow.
Yeah, the Soviet Union did this propaganda film, which they just released. The Russians just released that propaganda film, and I have to tell you, they took the most dramatic event possibly in human history and turned it into the most boring documentary possibly in human history. But it's still 50 megatons. It's just a reminder of just how destructive we can be, but we can be equally constructive if we choose to. So I think that's the lesson. And of course, nature is always constructive. It's always trying to build things back up to make the world more fertile, more hospitable to life, because that's what we're all here for. That's what ecological science is all about, seeing how life interacts with everything and supports itself. So, all right, I'm hearing the music in the background, so I guess we're reaching the end of the show. Any last words, Rebecca?
I hope we can put the Cuyahoga River out again.
All right. Well, thanks all for listening. This is Joe DeMare
and Rebecca Wood
signing off.